Okay, so this right here is my $400 lunchbox gaming PC. It's small, clean, and surprisingly capable for the price. You can literally carry this thing around with just one hand. For under 400 bucks, this might be one of the most balanced and fun setups I've built in a while. So starting off with the CPU, we have the Ryzen 5 3600. This CPU has been in a ton of budget builds at this point, and for good reason. It has 6 cores, 12 threads, and although it's a much older CPU today as it was released back in 2019, making this chip almost 6 years old now, the performance we get is still surprisingly solid for 1080p gaming. I've personally used the 3600 in probably 5 or 6 builds over the years, and it still hasn't let me down. It runs cool, it's easy to work with, and even in 2025, it gives you a lot of value. The motherboard I'm using is the MSI B450i Gaming Plus AC, and this one cost me about $105 used. And yeah, it's not the newest board, but it does check all the right boxes. It has a mini ITX form factor, decent VRMs, Wi-Fi built in, and full support for Ryzen 3000 and 5000 CPUs with a BIOS update. Now, the B550 would have been a much better long-term option if I wanted PCIe Gen 4 or slightly better memory support, but it was actually quite hard to find AM4 ITX boards in the first place. So for this build, the B450 gets the job done, especially since I'm not running any crazy high-end components. RAM is a 16GB kit of Team Group Vulcan Z at 3200 MHz, which is pretty standard stuff for most of my builds. I picked it up for $30, and this kit just simply works well. 16GB is still the sweet spot for gaming, and 3200 MHz is basically the minimum you want for Ryzen. I know some people like to go higher with Expo or tuned timings, but in a budget setup like this, you're not going to notice the difference in real gameplay, as stability is definitely more important here than squeezing out a couple extra FPS. For storage, I'm running a 1TB NVMe SSD from Team Group, which I picked up for $52. It's not the fastest drive out there, but compared to a SATA SSD, the boot times and game loading speeds are still way faster. 1TB is also more than enough for Windows, a few big games, and all the usual apps. You could definitely go with 512GB here to save a few bucks, but you'll probably run out of space sooner than you think, especially with games like Warzone or Starfield taking up to 100GB each. Now let's talk about the case, which is what makes this build really stand out. The Deepcool CH160 goes for around $72 and has a built-in carry handle, which is where the lunchbox name comes from. This thing is super compact, but still supports full-size GPUs and has decent airflow for the size. It's not flashy, there's no RGB, but it just works really well. And honestly, I really like the look. It has a minimal design, solid metal panels, mesh front for airflow, and the handle makes it genuinely portable. If you're someone who moves your PC around a lot, you know, for LAN parties, dorms, or even just working between 2 places, this case is actually super convenient. Unfortunately though, I don't think this case is actually available in the States, which is unfortunate, but I really do like this case a lot. The power supply I use is a Fractal Design 450 watt SFX unit. I got it for $35 used, and while it's not modular, which made cable management way harder than it needed to be, it does fit in the case and powers the system without issues. Normally, I'd tell people never to buy a used power supply, and honestly, I still feel that way, but I took the risk here because this one looked barely used, and I have used the same model before. I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you trust the seller, but for this build, it helped keep costs low. The GPU is the RX 580 8GB, which I picked up for $50. I've said this before, but the RX 580 simply just won't die. It came out in 2017, and somehow it's still relevant in 2025 for 1080p gaming. It's not flashy, and you'll have to drop settings for some newer games, but for the price, nothing really competes. In a lot of titles, it's still neck and neck with the GTX 1650 Super, and it comes with double the VRAM. If you're on a budget and just want something that runs games well, this is still one of the best value GPUs out there. So in total, this entire build came out to $399, and the performance is way better than I expected. In esports games like Fortnite, Overwatch 2, and Valorant, I was getting anywhere between 140 to 180 FPS depending on the settings. These games are optimized really well, and the RX 580 handles them easily. If you tweak things a bit, like lowering shadows, turning off anti-aliasing, you could probably push this way past 160 on a high refresh rate monitor. Warzone was a little more demanding, but still ran between 70 and 85 FPS on a mix of medium and low settings. With FSR on, it actually stayed pretty consistent, and the input latency felt great even when there was a lot happening. Starfield ran at around 69 FPS on medium with FSR, and Marvel Rivals was hovering just above 50. Both of these games needed some setting adjustments, but they were totally playable. Thermals were solid too. The CPU stayed in the high 70s, only really touching low 80s in longer sessions, and the GPU sat around 70 to 75 degrees. If you're building in a case like this, I would definitely add at least one fan. You know, the stock airflow isn't that bad, but small cases always benefit from just a little extra ventilation. I'd upgrade the cooler too if I was pushing things harder, but for now the stock solution works fine. If I did have a little more money to spend though, I would have upgraded a few things. First, the GPU. Something like a used RX 6600, 2060, or 5700 XT would have gotten a big bump in performance while still working well with the 3600. Second is switching to a modular power supply. It would have made the cable routing in small cases so much easier and cleaner. And finally, for better long-term upgrade support is to have went with an B550 ITX motherboard. It would have cost more, but I would have gotten PCIe Gen 4, better RAM tuning, and overall better compatibility with newer hardware. But even without those upgrades, this build still feels great to use. It boots fast, runs cool, and the size is just so convenient. I love being able to just grab the handle and move the whole setup in one hand, and it really just does feel like a lunchbox, but with enough power to play basically everything I want. Whether you're on a tight budget or working with limited space, or just want something, you know, different from the usual tower setup, I actually think this kind of form factor makes a lot of sense. So let me know what you guys think of the lunchbox build in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.